Hi, and welcome to Week 9 Notes. In previous weeks, we've examined what ethics is, what kind of judgments are being made, what are they based on, and what values do we own and stand up for. This week, we apply ethical principles to a particular issue, that of privacy. With the rapid and ceaseless advance of technological innovation, the internet and the tools we use increasingly extract information from us and store this data. That data is stored and can be used for purposes that we're very often not clear about. Some of those purposes are of value to us, such as using the GPS in your mobile phone to guide you to your destination. But other purposes may not be so benign, such as revealing your credit card history to third parties, which could be damaging to you. In looking at this topic, we explore the current state of privacy and look at the ethical issues that are raised by it. Let's recall some of the ideas that we've looked at that are relevant here. One idea is the distinction between what is ethical and what is lawful. This distinction gives rise to 4 categories. The category that is of most of interest to us in business ethics is Quadrant 2, the acts that may be legal, but which we would consider to be unethical. Remember that when a company is doing something that is questioned on ethical grounds, their invariable defence is that what they are doing is legal. And we know that the law can't regulate everything, because that would restrict everyone's freedom too much, and because often things are too hard to define clearly. So there are actions which the law leaves alone. Example, marital infidelity, and through such things as rudeness or lack of respect, or the milder forms of bullying. Then, in week 5, we looked at the distribution of goods in society, and the tension between the right to liberty and the desire for fairness to prevail. We talked about the principle that people should have as much liberty as possible without interfering with the liberty of others. There is also a utilitarian aspect involved. We want to create the greatest good for the greatest number, but we also want to protect the well-being of individuals, especially those who are more vulnerable. Privacy is one of the corollaries of these principles. This is an appropriate time to reintroduce this diagram. It is a dynamic metaphor. It is a spring that wells up from the middle and radiates outwards. As changes continually occur in societies, they generate new questions for ethics, which well up from the middle. As they radiate outwards, people discuss their implications and wonder how to deal with them. Sometimes new rules get enacted in laws, and sometimes the response is determine new norms among people and more informal rules. The metaphor is very apt for thinking about the human implications of new technologies and the internet. We also have expectations about what ethical companies and organisations would look like. An organisation acting ethically would do certain things and refrain from others. One of the things that ethical organisations would avoid would be subjecting customers or clients to harm. Out of all the actions in the 2 lists on the screen, perhaps the area that's most under threat with the advance of technology is this area of subjecting clients or the public to undue risk of harm, and that harm can be financial, physical, or emotional. The growth of data collection has led to some rebellious responses, such as Wikileaks, where thousands of confidential government documents were released to the public. This has led to intense debate about the benefits and the evils of growing stores of data and how much data should be collected. You might also note recently in Australia there have been laws about storing data from everything, such as emails, telephone conversations, and the concerns that were expressed about that. So privacy is also an issue at the more immediate level, and this is true in the workplace. It's not hard to think of privacy issues that affect many of us, such as working in an open plan office, or employer surveillance of employees' emails, which is just about universal now. In some work environments, there are even more intrusive managerial actions, such as monitoring employees' toilet breaks, or whether they can leave the employer's premises during work hours, and whether people can drink alcohol during work time. And that will be different in different workplaces, and in some contexts occupational health and safety laws will play a role, but it's also an issue about personal freedom and about privacy. We should recognise the role that power plays in managerial policies as well. It is technology that has given employers greater powers of surveillance. The question from an ethics perspective is this: what is the appropriate balance between what the business needs to achieve its goals, its legitimate goals, and what respect for people requires? In the commercial world, you would be familiar with many of the new techniques that are being used to gather customer data and use it to drive sales. Some of this development we may regard as benign, such as movement tracking by our mobile phone and the use of cookies on our websites. The concern is that this data is weaving a web around us, and it leaves us vulnerable. The sale of information to third parties is a growing phenomenon, and one that's seeking to force our acceptance of it. Perhaps it's too late already, and it's gone too far. As Scott McNeely said back in 1999, you have zero privacy anyway, get over it. It's all very well. There is a paradox about information. Stuart Brand's idea is intriguing. His idea was that there is a tension between information wanting to be free, as he puts it, and the drive to put a price on information. Many of the services that we use are free, such as Gmail, but the situation is changing continually, and we may find ourselves dependent on tools that have suddenly got a price on them. And companies are seeking to move towards the rental model as well. For example, instead of buying Microsoft Office outright, you can now pay a monthly subscription for it, which means that once you stop paying, you no longer have it. These changing commercial realities make it hard to come to grips with the question of what information should be private and what you need to share just to enable you to keep operating. What behaviour by companies is an unacceptable breach of privacy, and what should be regulated and how? There's a link here to an article by Abhijit Bajuri that discusses the hidden price of free software tools. Remember also the case study in the textbook that's assigned to this week, the study on Google and its efforts to, if we can believe them, to balance business with respect for individuals' privacy. I said earlier that ethics is underpinned by our ideas of what constitutes a person. What is our conception of the nature of humans? There are also conceptions of how people think and make decisions. In the modern era, this has been greatly influenced by prevailing concepts in economics. Central to traditional economics is the idea of the rational person, a person who is an autonomous agent, making decisions based on information and reason only. And this has justified much economic policy, but in recent years it has been brought into question. An alternative school called Behavioural Economics says that the rational model does not explain human behaviour all that well, and we should be taking a different approach. In fact, people are influenced by many factors in making decisions, including emotions, habits, the influence of others, and in any case, they didn't never have perfect information about the market, so their decision is never going to fit the rational economic model. I think this approach takes us in a better direction, It fits with what we know about people better. I would just say that it may not go far enough. The assumption here is still that emotion is inferior and questionable, and rationality is superior. But there are many thinkers now who see humans as an integrated package of reason, emotions, motivations, and values. And it's detrimental to try and separate these things as if you could. However, the behavioural economists have recognised that people are influenced by a variety of factors, which include emotive factors. Hence, an ethical perspective has to look at whether companies are using emotive factors ethically. The key thing is whether people are respected, which means, are they allowed to make their choices without coercion? We can think of a spectrum of behaviour, so that influence ranges from persuasion, which is legitimate, through to manipulation, which is questionable, and to overt coercion, which we would have to say is unacceptable. So we can think of company behaviour on that spectrum. The importance of naming this spectrum of behaviour is that many of the techniques of marketing are becoming more subtle and indirect. With their intimate knowledge of your habits, a company can anticipate your desires, and you can find their product on your phone or computer screen with the answer to your desires just a click away at just the right time. A number of marketing-related issues are shown here. They suggest that many tech-savvy companies have few scruples about extending their reach, for example through product placement that seeks to use children as the salespeople to their own parents. These are very vexed issues. The Google story shows us how complex things can be, even for a company that prides itself on doing no harm.